car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
We are so glad that you are joining us. You are watching The Attorneys. I'm Mark Franklin. Good to have you with us. And on this show, we're going to be talking about the criminal process. But before we get into that, we'd like to remind you very early on that attorneys at Hollis Wright are standing by right now. They do that at the beginning of the show, and they are manning the phones throughout the show. All you have to do is call 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free and confidential call. So go ahead and do that right now, and you'll get a chance to get some really good information right there. Carter Clay is here. Good to see you, Carter.
Good to see you, Art. Yeah, we're going to be talking about the beginning stages of the criminal process, and we've got some incredible viewer questions here this evening, really kind of almost like a top 10 list of the most common questions people will have if they find themselves in a situation where they're being confronted by a police officer, being asked to do certain things, and they may ultimately be getting arrested for criminal charges. And we've all seen really some tragic situations arise in circumstances where people are interacting with the police. A lot of high-profile incidents of abuse, and really a lot of it has to do with non-compliance starts the process out oftentimes. Sometimes you get police officers who go overboard, but sometimes you get individuals that they may take it too far. It may take, they may not be compliant with what the officer is just asking them to do, and guess what that results in? That results in the situation escalating.
Or they think they know the law.
Or they think that they know the law and they're going to tell the police officer what the law is and what they can and cannot do, and that ultimately results in a situation that could have been handled calmly getting escalated into something that really turns out tragic. And so this is not a show to try and get people out of criminal charges or have them not arrested. It's really just a show about explaining the rights that people have and the responsibilities that they have. And oftentimes the responsibility is you've got to at least comply with some basic aspects of what a police officer is asking you to do. And we've got an outstanding lawyer here, Houston Harrison. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us tonight and then kind of unpacking this topic here. But tell the viewers a little bit about yourself and your practice of law.
Yeah, so like you said, my name's Houston Harrison. I practice exclusively criminal defense. I'm an assistant public defender in Tuscaloosa, and I've been doing that for right about 4.5 years now.
Okay, well, great. So you've seen a lot in those 4.5 years.
Quite a bit, yes, sir.
Yep, so you understand sort of the criminal process. So let's just kind of jump right in to these questions here. And I guess the broad question initially is, how does someone get charged with a criminal offense? Like, what are the different ways in which somebody could be charged?
Right, so, commonly we'll think about it in terms of misdemeanors and felonies, right? Felony offenses oftentimes come from investigation by the police. That's going to come in all sorts of different ways. A witness said you did something, and then they go pull video footage, they pull surveillance footage, they talk to other witnesses, things like that. And if they determine that they have probable cause, which is a good reason to believe, a reasonable basis to believe that someone committed a crime, they'll make an arrest. Sometimes with misdemeanors, it will be it needs to be committed either in the officer's presence where they viewed it, or there's some exceptions like domestic violence and things like that. There's also an additional way that someone can be charged with a felony offense. It's called a grand jury presentment. That's where the police have done an investigation. They maybe have decided they're not really sure if they have probable cause to make the arrest, to make the call themselves right then to make an arrest. Yeah. And so they present it to a group of folks called a grand jury. That's just a group of citizens from whatever county you're in that determines, is there enough probable cause? And if there is, once they presented that information to them, if there is probable cause, they will issue what's called a true bill. That just leads to a document called an indictment. That's your official charging document. It'll have a bond on it, and come with a writ or a warrant for your arrest. And that's how most criminal offenses begin.
So really, to kind of break it down a little bit further and simplify it, you're really talking about a circumstance where you've got an on-the-spot arrest, right, where the police officer maybe pulls somebody over or sees a crime being committed and they can arrest them on the spot right there, or circumstances where the police department comes into possession of evidence and information and material material that would allow them to reasonably conclude that a certain person has committed a crime, then there's a process for them to either go get a warrant for somebody's arrest or go through that grand jury process that you just mentioned.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Either like sort of on the spot, we saw a crime, we saw evidence of crime right here, we have good probable cause, or we need to do a little bit more, and maybe we want to present it to a grand jury.
Now, before we go any further, distinguish between a misdemeanor crime and a felony crime from the standpoint of sentencing. What types of sentences would people be looking at if they're charged or convicted of a misdemeanor versus a felony?
So misdemeanors are going to range from, if you get Class A misdemeanors, those are your highest form. They carry anywhere from and this is going to be basics. There are certain ones that have different ranges of punishment, but it always goes up to a year. Class B misdemeanors up to 6 months, C's up to 90 months, 90 days, 3 months, and then there's also violations and things of that sort. But all misdemeanors at their most serious cap out at 1 year.
Okay.
Whereas felonies go anywhere from a year and a day up to, depending on the class of felony, it can be life or life without possibility of parole, or even death in certain circumstances.
Yeah, but Houston, even in this early goings of that contact with law enforcement, you do have some rights as well, though.
Absolutely.
What is it that you can't do and you can do? If they want to search your car, or they tell you to step out of the car, what are your rights at that point?
So when we're talking about, rights when you're interacting with the police, you're really thinking about kind of mainly your Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights, right? Your Fourth Amendment right to be free from unreasonable and unlawful searches and seizures, and then your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and your Sixth Amendment right to counsel. We're talking about searching a car, it's going to be your Fourth Amendment, right? They need to search anything. They either need a warrant, that complies with the relevant law in your state or in your jurisdiction, and then or an exception to the warrant requirement. That's going to be, just the easiest example is plain view. I come up to your car, I need a warrant to search your car, unless I look in there and see what is obviously contraband, right? That's going to be, there's a big bag of drugs right there on your passenger seat. I can see it, I can search that part of the car, I can get in there and do that. So that's going to be kind of your main rights when it comes to searching.
Well, and I would think one of the biggest exceptions that you probably deal with on the criminal defense side of it is consent. Right?
Absolutely.
Because people, as you know, are people that they aren't used to interacting with the police, and the police are very skilled and they're trained on how to do this. And so if somebody walks up to your car, even though there may not be any contraband in the car, they can ask you, hey, can I search your car? Oh, absolutely, officer, I'd love to comply with police officers' request. You have consent to search my car? Okay, well, come on out. Now all of a sudden they have consent, so that applies oftentimes, doesn't it?
Right, yeah, consent is probably the most common. Consent in plain view, or honestly, it's more plain smell in the form of marijuana oftentimes. But consent is usually I would say probably the most common way they end up in the car, because why not, right? They want to search the car, there's nothing in here.
But it seems like if you don't give consent, that's when you start getting into an agitated situation, even with a law enforcement officer.
Yeah, I think that's probably what people would think, but the reality of it is you can just politely say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you, though.
Yeah.
And then they may still search your car, right?
Right.
But you probably have a good defense at that point.
Right. If they're searching, if they're searching, there's no stopping them. There's no point in trying to stop them. The game's changed, and you're focused on a different goal at that point.
Talking to you.
Exactly. Yes, sir.
That's good.
All right, let's go to break, and then we'll come back and continue the discussion.
All right. Good discussion as we get started here. I want to remind you, we told you at the top of the show that we've got attorneys from Hollis Wright standing by. That's true. They're standing by throughout the show. All you have to do is call 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free, confidential call from someone at Hollis Wright. They'll talk to you right away. Stick around. We'll continue this discussion on the other side of the break. We'll be right back.
Here's some good information from our firm to you. Hollis Wright recently launched the Law Talk podcast. With podcasts becoming so popular, this will be a simple way to provide our loyal viewers with more opportunities to access information about important legal topics and to learn more about our firm and how we can help you if the need ever arises. There are many ways to access the Law Talk podcast. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen. Also, episodes are always available on the Hollis Wright YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Just search up Hollis Wright in the Law Talk podcast. Don't wait, take advantage and listen today. Thanks for watching The Attorneys, and we know you'll enjoy the Law Talk podcast.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery. Find community.
at Bradford.
We are talking about the criminal process here on The Attorneys, and so glad to have you with us, and reminding you that we're on all social media platforms, on Twitter, which is X now, also Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube as well. You can find some really useful information there, a lot of great resources, and find out what's happening with Hollis Wright throughout the week 24/7. Talking about the criminal process, and we're just getting started.
Yeah, there's a funny comedian that talks about how he knew he had the right to remain silent, but he didn't have the ability to remain silent. And I think that's oftentimes what Houston probably confronts in his practice. But I do want to talk about the right to remain silent and the right not to incriminate yourself at the scene, because I don't want the viewers to misunderstand and think that that means you don't have to cooperate at all or provide any information, because that would not be correct.
That's right. That's not correct.
All right. So if somebody gets pulled over in their car, or if they get stopped on the street and the police approach them, and of course typically they're going to ask them things like, what is your name? What are you doing here? Let me see your license. What is the responsibility of the person that is stopped in terms of what they need to be cooperating with?
Right. So there's a case from back in the 70s that basically gives the police, the right to ask you for that information, right? And a car stop can often also ask you to get out of the car. So you got to give that information. And well, you said that about not cooperating. You certainly want to cooperate, but to an extent, right? You want to comply and be cooperative and polite to an extent. You know, you don't want to get your rights trampled on, but you also don't want to get yourself in a situation where you're charged with obstructing or resisting arrest. So you want to give that information and be as polite as you can.
Yep. So for instance, let's just kind of have a dividing line here. They're stopped, they're pulled over. They ask for their license, got to give their license, got to give their name, address, just basic information like that. However, I think I would be correct in saying that if the police officer says, sir, you look like you're a little unsteady on your feet, I think you've been drinking, I want you to do a field sobriety test. At that point, I think they could politely decline and refuse to cooperate, correct?
That's right.
Okay.
That's essentially sort of like an extension of your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent.
Right.
Like making a statement against yourself, that's somewhat basically what that is, right? That's getting out and giving evidence against yourself, and you can politely decline to do that, and that's the end of that.
And same with the breathalyzer test. I'd like for you to take a breathalyzer. I politely decline.
That's right.
And you would be within your right to do that.
Absolutely. Now, there can be ultimately potential consequences for that. In particular, in a DUI circumstance, it can, if ultimately convicted of a DUI, the refusal to comply, in particular with the breath test out of jail, the Draeger test, it can result in some.
There are going to be consequences anyway, though.
Right.
But then you've
they
got
get enhanced.
information now, evidence, more evidence against you if you do it.
Exactly. Because that's what they're doing. They're not asking you out there because they want to see how good you stand, right? They want to know if they think you've been drinking, and that's what they're doing. They're asking for evidence against you.
Wow. So this is a question outside the context of somebody getting pulled over or stopped on the street, but it says, the police called me and said they want to talk to me about a crime. What do I do?
So, if they're calling because you witnessed a crime, right, you're fine, right? But if they're calling out of the blue and you think maybe I've done something or I've been somewhere and maybe something happened there and you don't know what they're talking about, they're calling to get a statement from you.
Yeah.
They're not calling to be your friend. They're calling because their job is to gather evidence about crime and make arrests. They're calling because they either have probable cause that to make an arrest, and they want to try to button it up before they arrest you and before they scare you with the handcuffs, or they're wanting to get you in there because they don't have probable cause and they want to get it the easiest way they can, which is have you admit to it or take little steps to incriminate yourself, even if you didn't do anything.
Yeah, this is why lawyers make bad clients, because the lawyer inside of me would want to ask them, well, what are you calling me about?
Absolutely. Right.
Why are you calling me? And I do think those would be appropriate questions to ask to get an idea. Well, you witnessed something. Well, I'll talk to you then. But obviously, I think it's within the person's right to ask, why are you calling me? What are you calling me about? Am I suspected of committing a crime?
Right.
And at that point, if they say yes, yes, and yes to all of those, then you call a timeout and say, well, I'm not talking to you anymore.
Right. And they may, frankly, they may not tell you the truth. They may say you're not, we're not.
They're not obligated to be truthful?
They're not.
Well, so they're not obligated to be truthful, but I mean, I guess they have to abide by certain rules of ethics. I mean, they can't completely trick you into it, but they could say and genuinely say, well, we're investigating this certain situation. We have not arrived at any identifiable suspects yet. I guess there are different shades of truthfulness there.
They'll be evasive. They'll evade and not answer questions directly, or try to make you feel a little bit more comfortable offering that information up.
Or they might say, why don't you come on down to the station and we'll continue this discussion further.
That's what I would call a red flag.
Yeah. All right, so we've talked about what if the police want to search my car. You don't have to let them, and you've got to be very careful about giving consent if you don't want to give consent. And we've talked about that earlier. What do I do if the police are actively violating my rights? And the example that's given here by the viewer is such as by searching my car against my will after I have refused. So this is sort of a different slant on what we've talked about earlier. A person does not give consent, they refuse to give consent, but the officer goes forward with the search. What should they do in that situation?
Right, and this is, I think this is where you really want to have a plan. You want to have thought about this before, you want to understand your rights, and because you've watched the attorneys, you now know what your rights are and what you're allowed to do and what you're supposed to do to protect yourself. And if that's happening, it's going to be very, very tempting to try to stop it, to be like, hey, you can't do that. I said no. That's a very easy way to get yourself charged with obstruction or resisting or things like that. If they're searching, they're searching. That's it. And if it's illegal, and that's for your lawyer to deal with later. And you want to give them the best situation that you can to be able to, be able to fight that later, maybe have it suppressed or thrown out if it's pursuant to an illegal search. You want to really give your lawyer all the ammunition you can to make that happen. And oftentimes you want to record. If you have access to your cell phone, you want to record it. Obviously don't get too close or anything that would be perceived as interfering, but that's what you're going to want to do.
Well, and that's a great example or illustration of what I talked about at the outset, where things can escalate, right? Maybe somebody knows that they have a right not to consent to the search. They don't give that consent. They know that what the officer is doing is likely against their rights, but the officer is going to do it anyway. And as Houston says, don't challenge them on it. Don't try and prevent them from doing it, because that's a situation where things can escalate. You could be criminally charged for obstruction of justice, but also you could find yourself in an altercation with a police officer that could escalate things quickly.
Which goes back to the point of what you know and what you don't know. And interesting factoid there, only 3% of Americans actually fully understand their Miranda rights. Can we talk about that when we come back as well?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll do that. Stay with us now. We're going to take a break here. We're going to wrap this all up and hopefully make sure you understand exactly what's going on when we talk about the criminal process, and especially the beginning of the criminal process. You got a little bit more time now to contact Hollis Wright by calling 1-844-LAW-TALK. An attorney is standing by live to take your call right now. It's a free call. It's also confidential. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
If this place could talk, it wouldn't. It would sing and celebrate all of our stories of addiction recovery, victory, and community. This is Bradford Health Services. It all changes here.
You are watching The Attorneys. Welcome back. Thanks for being with us as we're talking about the criminal process and the early beginning of the criminal process. As we were heading to break, we talked about Miranda rights, and only 3% of Americans fully understand Miranda rights. Help them out.
So, and I believe that study was done through Palo Alto University. I'm not sure what year it was published, but, we're talking about Miranda rights. When you're arrested, they're talking about, the right to remain silent, the right to an attorney, and then they tell you, these are, just little statements that they tell you as a part of that, when you're arrested, that there's any statements that you do make can be used against you in a court of law. It's important to remember, and a police officer can arrest you without reading those rights to you. Those rights relate directly to statements that you make. It comes out of your Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. And that's its intention is to make sure that you understand that right, that you know that you have that right and the right, your Sixth Amendment right to a lawyer. If they don't take a statement from you, if they don't interrogate you, they don't have to tell you that.
Okay.
That's what that's for, and they have to do it before they make any what they call custodial interrogation. That's going to be if you feel like you're in custody or if you're actually in custody, handcuffs, arrested, taken to the jailhouse, that kind of thing.
Well, I'm sure there's studies out there about this, but it's always intrigued me because I know that there has to be a percentage of people that are out there that actually do understand their Miranda rights, but yet they waive those rights and still talk to the police officer. My instinct is that there's a population of people out there that think that they can talk their way out of the situation that they're in, or that they can convince the police officers that they did not commit the crime that they're suspected of committing. But what is your experience in that regard?
My experience is that you're not going to talk yourself out of it, but you very well may talk yourself into it. In fact, that's often what happens. What we talked about earlier, where they either have probable cause and are trying to button it up and make it a little bit easier, or they don't have it and they're trying to get it. It's usually that they don't have it and they want you to give it to them. They want you to give them the reason for them to believe that you committed a crime. And that's what so often happens.
Is it a subjective standard by the police in terms of when they have to read you your Miranda rights? Because what I'm talking about are circumstances where the police officer is talking to an individual, they don't read them the Miranda rights, the person basically through the conversation confesses to it, and the police officer's asked, well, why didn't you read them their Miranda rights? Well, I didn't suspect them of committing the crime. I was just trying to gather information. They just volunteered all this. Do you see that from time to time?
I do, right? And it's, it's a little bit of a, as is the law oftentimes, it's a little bit gray and subjective, right? Yeah. It's custodial interrogation. When you are, are you actually in custody? Like, have you been arrested and hauled off to jail or taken to an interrogation room somewhere against your will? Or do you feel like you're in custody? That's going to be, and that's based on a couple of different, factors, such as, do I feel detained? Would I feel able to leave? If I'm pulled over and there are 4 police officers surrounding my car, that feels pretty in custody, right? So those are going to be circumstances where if they're questioning you about a crime, they're going to need to read you those rights.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about, they are being arrested, or they have been arrested. They're in the back of the police car. What could they expect to happen next in terms of going to the police station, being booked, those types of things?
Right. So one thing to remember too is once you're in the car, just because you're in custody doesn't mean that, like we're talking about Miranda rights, doesn't mean that they have to read you those rights yet.
Right.
They haven't questioned you. So some folks just start talking back there. You want to be careful. You want to invoke your right to remain silent. That's another thing. The law says you have to unequivocally and affirmatively invoke your right. You need to say it, not just remain silent, for the police to stop questioning you. And so once you're there, they're going to give you, that phone call. They will often tell you that phone call is recorded. It will be said by an automated voice at the beginning of that phone call for you to call family, a bondsman, things like that. And that's often a place where people get themselves in trouble, is that first phone call they start talking about their case. But you ask, what's the first thing? You're going to want to call probably a bondsman or somebody to call a bondsman for you, right? Pretty much every criminal charge, with some exceptions, are entitled to a bond, and the police officer will decide that bond amount based on the rules of criminal procedure or jurisdictional rules, and that will be the amount. You'll call a bondsman, and kind of commonly they'll expect about 10% of whatever your bond is up front to make that bond for you.
Yeah. So I want to circle back to one thing that you mentioned earlier. It's custodial and interrogation. So if you're placed in a police car, if they arrest you and place you in the police car, do they have to read you your Miranda rights at that time, even though they're not going to question you? Or if you get arrested and they just put you in the police car, you've got a 15-minute ride back, they're not asking you a single question, you just start talking. Is that stuff admissible against you?
It is. So they don't have to read you those rights right then. But what so often happens is they'll get you back to the interrogation room if they're going to take a statement from you, and they'll have a sheet for you. That's basically, they take down your name, the time, the day, make sure they'll record themselves going over those things with you, ask if you understand them, and then have you sign saying you understand them, and then have you sign saying that you waived them.
Because normally in the TV shows, they always read them the Miranda rights right when they arrest them. But but I think that's an important distinction that the viewers need to understand, which is that there are clever ways in which the police officers can get the information that they want from you without violating your Miranda rights by some of these situations that we've talked about, where you're put in a police car but you're not asked questions and you just start talking.
Exactly. It's going to be incredibly tempting on that long ride back to the jail to start professing your innocence and talking about things, and that's where you need to remember right to remain silent. Call your lawyer first.
Short period of time, 30 seconds before we need to kind of wind it up. What does the process look like, though, from after you get out on bond? What kind of time frames are you looking at in terms of having your day in court?
So unfortunately, it's good to give the most legal answer I can. It depends. It depends on your jurisdiction, the level of crime. Misdemeanors are going to happen much quicker. Felonies take a lot longer. Depending on the courtroom, the judge's backlog, those things can take a while. Generally, your arraignment is going to come right after, a few months after your indictment and your charge. But your actual, any kind of trial, that can take anywhere from a year to 4 years or so. Yeah. Depending on where you are.
Great information you provided tonight. Thanks so much for being
Absolutely.
here.
Thank you for having me.
Enjoyed it.
Very enlightening indeed, and we want to thank you for joining us as well. And remember to follow Hollis Wright on all the social media platforms, on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, and also on YouTube as well. And make an appointment. Join us again next week, same place, same time, for The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.